The wood for the truck's body was the shelf of an old cabinet. Initially cleaned up on the thicknesser, it was then sawn, off-camera, to the correct widths, before being put back through the thicknesser to achieve the required thickness. The center portion was made from sections, 14 mm thick. These were glued together into 2 pairs, prior to bandsawing. The templates were glued in place. The use of blue tape as an intermediary allowed the templates to be removed cleanly. The first operation was to drill the axle holes 7 mm diameter. The 2 pairs were separated on the bandsaw. Then the profiles were cut out. With the templates removed, the 2 pairs were glued together to form the center part of the body. Identical inner side panels were produced from 2 boards fixed together with double-sided tape, and then cut out on the bandsaw. Identical outer side panels were produced in the same manner. Starting with both of the inner panels, the 4 side panels were glued to the body one at a time. This made alignment easier when clamping the panels in place. Whilst the glue on the body was drying, the wheel blanks were cut out with a hole saw. Cutting most of the way through from one side, then finishing from the other, made it easier to remove the blanks from the saw. The wood used for the wheels was a slat from an old bed. The periphery of the wheels were sanded, and the edges rounded over. A relief was cut into the outer face of each wheel. This effectively created the tire and the wheel's central boss. To create the tire's tread, 3 grooves were cut into the wheel's periphery. And the wheels were given a final sanding. To create the spare, one of the wheels was screwed to a sacrificial piece of wood, and was then cut on the chop saw. Wood from the offcuts box was sawn into 4 pieces to make the side of the cargo box. A bed slat was reduced to 6 mm thickness off camera, and 2 pieces were cut for the base of the cargo box. The sides of the cargo box were glued together, ensuring that the corners were square. Then the 2 pieces of the base were glued in position. Once the glue had set, the excess wood on the base was sawn off, and the sides of the completed box were sanded before it was glued into place. Due to the height of the rear of the cab, it was impossible to drill a hole in the dashboard for the steering column. Hence a sub-assembly was created. The steering wheel was drilled to suit the steering column, a bamboo barbecue stake. Then the disc was cut out with a hole saw. As the disc was too thick, it was fixed to a spare block with hot glue, and sanded to a better thickness. The second disc, used as the dashboard mounting, was produced in a similar manner, but the hole for the column was drilled at an angle, as the last operation. The steering column was glued into the mounting disc, and the assembly was glued to the dashboard. Then the steering wheel was glued in place. This is easier to accomplish, prior to the seats and side windows being fitted. The 3 seats were cut out on the bandsaw, the wood coming from the offcuts box. The profile of the seats was sanded to their final shape. Two seats were glued together to form the bench seat. The seats were glued in place, adding superglue to hold the parts whilst the wood glue set. The side windows, and the towing hitch, were all made from the same piece of bed slat, which had been reduced to 6 mm thick. All 3 items were drilled 5 mm diameter. For the windows, the hole was to allow access for the scroll saw blade, and in the case of the towing hitch, it was for the hook to be fitted. Due to an error when cutting the body sections, the height of the windows and their frames had to be reduced. The towing hitch was cut out on the bandsaw. Off camera, a piece of 5 mm diameter dowel was glued in place to form the towing post. The windows were cut out on the scroll saw. This was followed by the profiles being cut on the bandsaw. The window frames were glued in place. Superglue provided an initial fix before the clamp was applied, and the wood glue allowed to dry. At this point, mineral oil was applied to the interior of the cab, prior to the cab's roof being glued in place. This was the point at which the wheels were also treated with mineral oil and set aside to dry. To ensure the front mudguards were identical, 2 pieces of offcut were fixed back to back with double-sided tape. The underside of the mudguards were cut out first. They were then sanded on a drum sander. Retaining the stock material on the outside made it easier and safer to hold. The outside profile was then cut on the bandsaw, and the 2 mudguards carefully separated. The mudguards were then glued in position and held in place with elastic bands until the glue set. They were shaped off camera using a Dremel. The cab's roof had been cut on the chop saw off camera from a piece out of the offcuts box. When the glue had set, any mismatch was sanded smooth. The edges were also rounded by sanding. An offcut 10 by 20 by 45 was glued in position to represent the toolbox. The spare wheel was also glued in place. The front bumper was cut 6 by 10 mm, with a length to suit the final width of the vehicle. The corners were rounded on the sander. Off camera, the roof had been sanded flush, and the edges rounded over. The headlights and tail lights had been cut from pieces of dowel and glued in position, as was the bumper. And the towing hitch. The underside was treated with mineral oil and left overnight to dry. Wheel spacers were produced, similar to the steering wheel. Drilled and cut with a hole saw, they were 18 mm diameter with a drilled hole to fit the axle shaft. The thickness needs to suit the width of the vehicle and the wheel alignment. The mirrors were also produced from an offcut. The dimensions were 6 by 10 by 12. They were drilled in one side to suit a stalk, like the steering column, cut from a stake skewer. The wheels and their spacers were fitted, superglue being used to form a quick bond. The remainder of the vehicle was treated with mineral oil. Being the most vulnerable part, fitting the mirrors was left until last. A hole for the stalks was drilled in each side, and the mirrors secured with super glue. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe.